Well, hello everyone. Patrick and I are really excited to chat with you today about a few quick ways to get students doing the thinking and learning in any environment, whether that's at home, whether that's in a brick and mortar classroom. And we want to today get some real, tangible, and hopefully exciting ideas into your hands. But we should probably start off by introducing ourselves. So I'm Brittany Davis. I taught middle school and high school and now lead our learning solutions team here at Lucid for Education. And the real guest of honor, presenter of honor today is Patrick Pauley. He's a director of technology for Sycamore School in Indiana, and he's also the founder of the blog IT Babble. So actually, Patrick, do you mind sharing a little more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the introduction. Uh, I've been the director of Sycamore School, which is an independent school in Indianapolis, Indiana. And our mission is to educate gifted children. So we have a very narrow mission, and we're preschool through grade 8. And if you're ever in Indianapolis, stop on by and see what we do here, because I think what we do is pretty extraordinary. We have a great community. And I've been in education for, this is my 21st year. And I love it. And yeah, and I started IT Babel back in 2012 just to share some of my professional thoughts with my colleagues and with people around the world. And it's been very rewarding, and I keep doing it to this day. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. We're so excited to have you and your perspective too from being on the ground in education. So today what we're hoping to do is to share with you, really this is coming from Patrick, but to share with you some ways that we can see getting students working together quickly in less than 3 minutes, so that group work, partner work doesn't have to die, even if COVID is still kind of impacting our learning situation. And then also to give you enough ideas that you can leave thinking or planning one collaborative activity you'd like to do with your students in the next couple of days.
Yeah.
So, actually, from there, I believe, Patrick, you have an example to kick us off, right? So, I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you.
Okay. Yeah. And before I share the example, some things that I really like about Lucid is how easy it is for people to learn. And so you can even have young children learning this, like in grades 2 or higher. But yet it's still powerful enough that higher education can use it for so many different things. And it just seems like such a great tool. So I was very excited. So let me show you guys kind of. I'm going to share my screen here, and if I can find it. Okay. So here is, oops, hold on here. There we go. When I was teaching computers in middle school, one of our units was a podcasting unit. And I thought, that seems like a really good collaborative unit to bring to Lucid Spark. And so because students can sign in with their Google account or their Office 365 account, it's really easy for them just to get in and get started. And of course, you can just share the link on your learning management, Microsoft Teams, Schoology, Google Classroom, whatever, Edmodo. And so here was kind of a thing. We only started it with coming up with ideas for a podcast. So we didn't even talk about what is a podcast so much, like what are the nooks and crannies and the technical part behind it. We just started with the content and getting started with ideas. And so here I would just have kind of like a word, write your ideas for a podcast. And then the students can use sticky notes and put their ideas. And what's so awesome about Lucid Spark is that these little reactions, so you can see who reacted to it and what they thought about it. And so as you can see, I have one here on podcast and why my socks stink. Well, I put a funny face on here because they're probably joking. And then I put a thumbs down, like that's probably not such a good one. But this activity could really be up and running as soon as the kids walk through the door in the classroom. It's so fast and so easy to use. You have your tools over here, which are very self-explanatory. So if you just want to add a sticky note, that's really all you have to do. And it's so easy for the students to do that. So it is pretty cool. And I'm sorry, I got to move some things over here. Also, there is, you can leave comments. So students and the teacher can communicate with each other and you can have collaboration, easy to share it out. And you have these fantastic team tools that you can use. So like a topic, something like this could last, if you let the kids go, it could probably last for like 20, 30 minutes. Maybe you only want it to be like 5 minutes. And this little timer here would be great on just keeping some control on that, because kids, when they get going, are hard to stop sometimes. So, but that's a good start. But I was like, how else can I use it? What else can I use this for? And so I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And I figured not just a place for collaboration, but also a place to share important information about the unit. So I've got the different roles that the students would have here. So, and we can discuss this during class and make changes to this. And maybe there needs to be another role. Maybe they want to make artwork for their podcast. Well, that could be a new role there, and we could add that there and what it has to do. So there's so much here that you can do. And I got going. And so I just kept going. And so let's see here. Anchor FM, thumbs up. So easy to do podcasting. Fantastic site. So I got a bunch of links here on how to get started, how to create an episode, and then just kind of talk about the structure of the podcast too. And again, these are things that can all be changed and edited in real time. Like if I want to get rid of that, just so simple and so easy to do. I'm just going to move the outro up here. Sorry, that was a little.
Patrick, I'm curious, how did you build this structure in the first place?
And oh yeah, so there's so many different ways. That's a great question, Brittany. Thank you. Sometimes I get a little lost. So in templates, they have all these fantastic templates here, decision trees, concept mapping. And what I did is I actually did this flow chart, and I'm just going to click on it. And you can insert this template. And what I did is I just modify, and then you just click it and it shows up. And what I am, and then once you have this template, you can actually go and modify it however you want. And that's pretty much what I did with it. I just used that template and just modified it to make it look like this for my own needs. And that's what another thing I love about Lucid is, you know, before we've used things like MindNode or MindMeister, but those are just mind maps. Like it kind of keeps you constrained here. But with Lucid Spark, I could do that if I want to with my class, or I can do a TWL chart. I have all these different templates to choose from, or I can just make my own, which is fantastic. And I can reuse that over and over again. So it's, yeah, that was good. That was a really good question. I'm going to delete this here, if that's okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, and then here we get to more I thought about, you know, a reflection. This would be a great place for reflections as well. Before I was using Google Forms, and the problem with Google Form and reflection is that only I see that feedback. I want to be able to share that with my students. I want to be able to share it with their parents and maybe even with the rest of the learning community at my school. And so having something like this, they can kind of see where we started from, the process to get there, and what the kids thought about the whole process, the podcasting as well. And we can, of course, add more. We can add as much as we want, because with Lucid Spark, the canvas it goes on forever. It's limitless, which is fantastic. Some other whiteboard programs, there is a limit. Like you get to a certain part and then that's it. You have to make a new file, which is kind of a pain. But here, you can just keep going, which is great. And I also put, I'm going to use the mini map here because the mini map is so good. And I'm going to come down here to this part and zoom in again. So this is a place for them to put their finished product. So that way the students know, hey, this is where I go to listen to my friend's podcast, or maybe from another class. It's another thing that happens in middle school and high school. Brittany, I'm sure you can relate to this, is that you'll have this fantastic presentation in this class and you're like, boy, I wish all my other students could have been exposed to that. I wish they could have seen that. Well, with a podcast, you just get that link and you put it up there, and you can have it for all your classes right there. And so it's so many different places, so many different things coming together in one place. Whereas before, I would put this on Google Classroom and there would be the rubric, but then there would be another link for resources. But there's so much clicking to do in the resources that this is great. It brings the whole project into one spot. And I think that's what's super special about Lucid, is that you have that flexibility and that power and the ease of use to bring everything into one place, which is great.
Really good point, Patrick. I'm curious. This is kind of, to some extent, a subject agnostic activity, which is really cool. Like I for sure would have done something similar with my students in English class, and I could see it in others as well, just depending on the topic we want to create a podcast on.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you've had thoughts too about like what other subjects, what are some things we could do with other subjects or other grades? Have you seen any ideas out there?
Oh yeah, for sure. In high school, this lends itself for great project-based education. On any, like you said, it doesn't have to be technology. It could be anything. A great way for groups to organize the work they have to do, like completely independent of really a lot of teacher involvement, maybe some teacher guidance. But the students can come here. Maybe they're doing a project about a famous battle in World War II. Well, they can collect all their information here, organize it into a way. Maybe they're going to be making a video of it. Well, this would be a great place to prep all of that whole project. Who's going to do what? Who's bringing what equipment? Who's working on the script? What topics do we want to cover? Here's our time frame. I think that it brings a lot of, especially when students and groups are working, it can be very chaotic trying to get everything together. Here, this helps helps organize that chaos into something that's digestible for the group. And I mean, not only do you have these great templates, but you also have these containers. Do you mind if I switch to another Lucid
Oh yeah, please.
I have? So at my school, this is a project it's not with my students. It's just with my IT team. And we're getting ready that's the podcast one. I had it opened again. That's okay. But we're getting ready to do a technology audit. So we want to kind of take stock of everything, all the technology we have in our school, and how useful is it? Is it used by a lot of people? Is it not used by a lot of people? How can we improve it? Do we have a great tool, but nobody's using it? How do we get more people on there? And so my team and I, we just kind of got together on a Lucid Spark and we made all these sticky notes. And I'll be honest, for transparency, I did mix them up a little bit more. They were kind of like grouped together. I did mix them up a little bit more for this demo, but so as you can notice that, like, for example, the copier, that is called classroom hardware. Even though the whole school uses it, I can come over here to my containers. And so when I need to meet with my head of school, or maybe we need to meet with our business office to talk about purchases, I can then kind of organize this by the tags or by the color, and it's instantly, it's right there. It's so nice. It's so beautiful. I could see high school students doing that. And when you're talking about middle school students, well, this podcast unit, this is a middle school unit. And when you're talking about elementary school, I think it's great for brainstorming, getting ideas. Like, you're going to be studying leaves. Well, maybe this is a great place for them to ask a lot of questions that should be answered throughout the unit. And not only that, but it's also a great skill to teach these younger kids how to collaborate with people online. like what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, this is a great digital citizenship lesson as well as an academic or content lesson as well. So
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I'm talking too much there. So.
No, no, that's great. I see your point. I've seen a lot of elementary teachers using it to say like, okay, we're beginning to study volcanoes or we're studying dinosaurs. Like, tell me what you know. And so this is a quick way to surface all those ideas from the students because they all kind of understand that drag and drop. But to your point about that digital citizenship, as I've talked with some educators, one thing they've said is it's great that like you can always see the name of the person who put that emoji. So while we're like tapping into ways that our students communicate, it's still in a responsible way. It's never like totally anonymous, right?
Yeah.
And so we can talk about that, and any comments that are left, they can never be erased. They can be resolved. So they're not like catching your attention as I have to do something with this comment, but that way we keep a sense of responsibility and accountability in the collaboration, which is probably helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that accountability is so important because that's just how life is in an online world. I mean, there's nothing that is truly deleted. If you delete an email that you sent, but well, the person who received it has a copy of it and they can do whatever they want with it. And so
Mhm.
I think that's an important real world, something tangible that they can see. And kids are going to be kids. They're going to make bad choices, but it's as good that we kind of leverage that and make it a teachable moment. And I think this is a nice, safe environment where students can learn that lesson. So yeah, I like it. I know in Indiana, our COVID numbers are unfortunately rising, and a lot of schools, including our school, is going to be switching back to distance learning. But Lucid Spark is definitely one of our tools that we've been sharing with our teachers. Like this is something that you can use to help reach out and collaborate and work on some projects with your students. And so, yeah, it's
That's a good point.
yeah, it's
Um,
and yeah, oh, sorry, like you said
oh,
earlier, it doesn't matter if you're in the classroom, you can still use this, or if you're in distance learning, you can still use it. It's just it's applicable anywhere, which is great. Anywhere you have an internet connection, you can collaborate, which is awesome.
and for many devices, so if our students are just using phones,
Hmm.
it is like that touchscreen compatible, right? They can draw, they can freeform draw, they can move things around,
Yeah.
which I think is important because who knows in what environment they might be in, what technology they might be using at that moment to try and access the learning. Another thing I thought that was pretty cool is I saw a teacher do a chalk talk. So take a traditional form of discussion in her English language arts class, chalk talk, and they would always do it on a whiteboard. But she has students who are at home and students who are at school, and she didn't want them to miss out on that experience together. They feel like they just learn so much. There's so much richness in their discussion. So they just all students in the classroom and students at home jumped into Lucid Spark, and they were just dragging out, like they were just connecting the arrows to different shapes and commenting on each other's comments. And she said one thing that I found interesting, because I think there's the question too about, well, what about when COVID is not a factor, when we're all back in the classroom? We definitely don't want to learn, and I'm speaking from my like former educator self, something that is only applicable right now and that's not a best practice and something that I'll use going forward. And one
Yes.
thing I found really interesting that she shared, her name was Emily, was that she actually saw some of her students participating more equally in an environment like this. And that was kind of surprising to her. But as she reflected on it, she's like, oh, I have students in the classroom who are nervous to walk up to the whiteboard and write something. And
Yeah.
so this like lowered the affective filter to them, where because it wasn't such a high risk to participate, then their voices were being heard more in that class discussion. She just found that kind of fascinating. But
Yeah, I have seen that too. That's a great point. That's a really good point. We have some students who are just so afraid or self-conscious, and they just don't want to, they have such anxiety about raising that hand in class and participating. But here is they don't have to speak up. They can be heard, like using a sticky note, writing or connecting some ideas together, or leaving an emoji reaction. It's so many different ways to communicate. That's a great point. And another point is sometimes it doesn't happen too often. Luckily, we're knock on wood, but when some of our students Zoom, sometimes they get disconnected, like their internet's not so good. Well, here is now they have a record of what was happening in in that class at that time. It's something they can go back and reference to and ask specific questions to their classmates or to the teachers. And so, yeah, it's such a great idea. Like that got me thinking about the chalk talk, you were talking about. It's like, that's great. But then when that class is over, well, that, where's the record of that? Like, who, maybe some students were taking notes and maybe the teacher was taking notes on the whiteboard, but where does it go after that? And here we have a actual record of it that can be used, maybe shared with other classes, shared with other colleagues that they could use in their class. Yeah, I'm all a big thing about making education transparent and sharing. I just love sharing stuff. I just love sharing.
Well, that's a really good point. Yeah, like what does that record do for us? And to that point about the transparency, and then also you got me thinking too, like, oh, could that be what we then use as the springboard into writing? Like if we have a record of it, can it start to now guard? I mean, of course, I'm thinking from my English language arts lens, but I've actually talked to some science teachers. Maybe this seems ironic about this, where that it's helpful for their students to collect all the information they're processing or from an experiment and start to organize. And then that is kind of a springboard into their scientific writing as well. So
yeah, in fact, with before Lucid Spark, and I was using Lucid Chart for a very long time. A friend of mine turned me onto it because in IT I was making workflows for people. I was like, if this happens, try this. Just helpful things. And if people could visualize it, I figured that would be easier for them to follow, rather than like referencing an email back and forth on their phone. But when I've had a lot of science teachers, I've been turning them on to Lucid Chart for doing procedures for labs and just like helping to explain like certain chemical, I think not my wheelhouse, so forgive me if I misspeak here, but explaining certain chemical reactions when you add some chemicals together or when certain conditions are right. And so and Lucid makes such great quality stuff that when Lucid Spark came around, I was really excited about it, and I'm still excited about it. So, yeah.
cool. Hey, well, Patrick, I may share my screen if that's okay as we wrap up here, just to show
Yep.
um, one other thing right here. So I'll move on to this because something you said made me think of, and I do have this pulled up, so I'll jump to this. You were talking about Lucid Chart, and so I was thinking, oh yeah, where does Lucid Spark fit in with Lucid Chart, right? Is kind of a question, and Lucid Press, and where we're seeing this is coming together as the Lucid for Education Learning Suite, and that it's walking students through, as we've talked with educators like yourself, administrators like yourself, teachers, what they're telling us is that it's guiding students kind of naturally through a process of learning that we all go through, whether we know we're going through it or not. It may be so inherent and ingrained in us now that we go through without really, like, subconsciously, without really realizing it, but that it helps make that more explicit for students as we're helping them develop those skills. And they see Lucid Spark as the start of that journey because it's the place to ignite those ideas, to get those conversations going. Maybe it's where we first start our collaboration, first start our brainstorming, but then the extension that I think you were helping us lead us through today. And so we see a lot of students then moving to Lucid Chart, which functions in education as dynamic graphic organizers because it allows students to start manipulating all that information, the new information they're processing, to assimilate it into the old information. But it gives them a structure that they can edit, right? Like I can grab these sticky notes, I can move them around, and now it's giving me kind of cognitive strategies. It's providing that scaffold of cognitive strategies. Oh, I want to compare and contrast this information with this Venn diagram, right? But in a way I can edit and manipulate and rethink through and collaborate with others in the process, so we can work on that together. And then where we see them going is Lucid Press. So all of these still have the same intuitive functionality, the same drag and drop functionality, the same easy collaboration, and templates, the function that we can build from templates if we want to. And we see them then coming to Lucid Press. And it's kind of interesting to think about, like, well, what do I do when I gain new knowledge and I assimilate the knowledge and I make sense of it? Often in our workplaces, in our communities, we want to do something with that. We're going to
Oh
share
yeah.
it with someone in some way, right? Or we're making something because of it. And sometimes it may be, it may result in a test, but most of the times in our lives, it's not a multiple choice assessment. We are producing some sort of product. And so we see educators coming to Lucid Press with students because they can choose from posters, brochures, infographics,
Hmm.
newsletters, anything like that. But there are hundreds of templates in those categories so that students, even if they're not a graphic designer, which I'm personally grateful for because that is not a talent of mine, but they can professionally communicate that. And that this is coming together as this suite so that students can move through that whole learning journey
Yeah.
of what do we do with new information and as they prepare to then use it in the future.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. And Lucid, their stuff is, I mean, I imagine companies, professionals are using Lucid to collaborate and to plan and brainstorm, not just students in schools, but I think this is a tool that they will probably come across in their adulthood and their professional careers as well. So yeah, I think, you know, exposing students to these products are a good thing because I think it really is preparing them for what's coming down the road. So
That that's a good point as well. Like it is, yeah, it's what teams are using. So, I like that point. Um, I would love to share too a few resources because you were sharing with us some great ideas. And so
mhm.
where we can go to learn a little more. One of them is if you go to our lucidforeducation.com and you come to K-12, over here on the right, two things to point out: mini lessons and certification course. So we do have a whole certification course that comes complete with micro credentials, badges, and a certificate if you want to learn more about how to use this in the classroom. And mini lessons is a whole bank of ideas from educators. Here's the Chalk Talk I was talking about. I'll just go ahead and open one, but as you scroll through, you'll see all of the core classes, but also CTE and fine arts and music. So it's really fascinating to see what educators are doing. They'll share their story, and then you'll get to see an actual student example, but then also their template so that we don't have to create from scratch, so that we can go ahead and use that. That would be a great place to check out. And one other to recommend is Patrick's blog. Feel free to check that out too. It's got some great information. Like he said, he loves to nerd out on how we best use technology in education. I don't think
Yeah.
that's nerding out. I just think that's really relevant and helpful right now. So
Oh, well, thank.
I'll wrap up with, please feel free to reach out with any questions. Here's our email. It looks maybe weird altogether, but it is lucid for education altogether at lucidchart.com. And then Patrick is accessible on his blog as well. So feel
Yep.
free to reach out to us. Anything else you would add, Patrick?
No, it just Lucid Spark is a great tool, and you should definitely look into it and check out itbabble.com. I think there's some really good stuff there, and um, we're happy to help. So I was this was a lot of fun, Brittany. Thanks for having me on.